All right, welcome back to Often Wrong. Today's episode, we're talking about gentrification, but we're going to talk about it a little bit differently than I think you've heard before. So strap in, let's talk about it, and make sure you respond in the comments below. Thanks for listening. Hey listeners, thank you so much for joining us again for this episode of Often Wrong. If you are enjoying how this season is rolling out, you can engage further by liking, subscribing, leaving a comment on wherever you listen to your podcast or on our website at carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong. From all of us at Often Wrong, thank you so much, and let's get back into the show.
Welcome back, everybody.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. And today's episode, I'm very excited, is about gentrification, but not in the way that most people have probably heard it argued, at least online.
Yeah, I think it is a hot button topic. I think maybe in most major cities in the world, at least right now. But yeah, we're not here to defend it or deny it today. I think I can safely say that you and I have both experienced it from so many angles. We've been a part of it. We've been blamed for it. We've watched it destroy neighborhoods. And we've also heard and seen the term just rot all of our brains online. So I think it's a good time to reframe it a little bit. I feel like more and more we've just been sitting with this question lately of like, what happens when this fight for culture turns into just a fight against your neighbors. Yeah. Because I think the truth is here that fighting your neighbors is almost always the wrong target. I think if you listen a couple episodes back, my viral comment on TikTok that I should be compensated for at this point, because it has like 60,000 likes, is about how if you're fighting your neighbors instead of your government, it's almost always the wrong answer. Mm-hmm. So we're going to expand on that today and see what it looks like when maybe protecting your culture can sometimes turn into performing erasure on people. And that's not what we want, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I think it's a good moment to ground us in your beautiful TikTok comment, because that is so true. And at the end of the day, like, we're in this together, but
Literally.
like the systems at play are not in it with us. So all power to all the people.
Literally.
And
with that said, I think it's time to get into our credentials
yes,
as experts on this topic, because, and I really cannot say this enough, I feel like we are all experts on all of these topics because we have lived experience with them. Mm-hmm. So we want to hear your POV too. So don't forget, you can write into us at carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong. You can go on our socials, which is at oftenwrongpod. Or you can leave it in the comments on whatever platform you're listening on. We look and we can respond to it at our next What We Got Wrong episode, which will also be our season finale. We just have 5 more episodes left for season 1 of Often Wrong. How exciting.
So exciting. Very exciting. Yeah. Let's get into our credentials.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Do you want to
So
go first?
you're from Denver and then you moved to LA.
Yes.
And now you live in a far off land from LA, which is still in California. But tell us about that.
Town.
How have you seen gentrification impact where you live in your adult life?
Well, and how have I participated in it and benefited from certain elements of it? I think, I'm excited to get into defining gentrification and what that actually looks like. But for me, coming to LA, it was like, oh, okay, these are the neighborhoods I can afford to live in. And these are the neighborhoods that are in the middle of gentrification, not the ones that have already been gentrified or the ones that, are pre-gentrification necessarily. But what I can afford is this little bubble bracket. And I just noticed LA is such an interesting place because we're a neighborhood metropolis. It's all about neighborhoods. And so there are very strong community ties all over the city, and every neighborhood feels different. And every neighborhood has a very rich history of different things. And, but I became very aware, I'm noticing the people who are moving in, and I'm noticing the people who are moving out, who can't afford the area anymore, who, are leaving historic Filipino town because they can't afford it. And then, more people are moving in of a certain class. And, it became clear, and you just started to see it faster. I also moved right before the pandemic, like a year before the pandemic. And that was an interesting kind of foray into things. I also ended up buying a home during the early start of the pandemic because my partner and I at the time had saved up a bunch of money and interest rates dropped to 2.5%,
Yeah.
which a moment of silence for that. And we found something in an area that we could afford. It was on the metro line, which is what we both needed for work. But it was in a historically black neighborhood that had been in the process of gentrification. Lamert Park, love Lamert Park, such a rich history. Also historically black, but also historically, I believe, Korean, and like a subject of the white flight situation in, the 1900s of some kind. But it's LA has a very storied history, and then obviously, the Tongva Nation that still resides there also is affected. So lots of like issues here deep under the surface of who has the right to what land. We can go into that, I think, another time. We may touch on it today, but I that was what I could afford. I bought that place, I could afford it, and that's where I lived. And I made an effort to get to know the community and get to know the, issues and the great things that were happening and the not so great things that were happening. But, I really would say it started like I was like, okay, well, it's kind of in the midst of this. But going back home to Denver is when I really noticed like, whoa, you used to not be able to drive through this neighborhood and now it's like where all the hot bars are. Like, interesting. And like, I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. Like, it's safer, but it's also like a little, it's different. And have people moved away? I don't actually even know who lived here before that. It's like, it's unpacking all the different angles, and it just feels like we try to point fingers at businesses and each other and neighbors and, developers and, not to say that any one person is culpable, because I think it's not, but like the system at large is what we need to be looking at.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I've been having this conversation about gentrification since probably 2014. And with so many people, I hear the feedback of just like, well, where am I supposed to live? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
Like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do here
Right.
because there's only so much that we can afford. So I think it's really just a larger truth of everyone's being priced out. And that impacts people disproportionately, obviously, because it always does, but
Yeah.
it is a much larger issue than I think what it is being talked about as recently.
Yep.
So I think the reason why I've been talking about this for so long, since I learned what it was, is I'm from Philadelphia, and my family, I have a white mom, a Nigerian dad. And the reason why, I think I was about 6 years old when we left Northeast Philadelphia to go into the suburbs. And we did that because while Philly is just an incredible city, working class city, I love it so much, it is also super segregated. And I don't think a lot of people know that or maybe are noticing that, but that's why we had to leave, because it was not a safe place to be a mixed family at that time. And the schools were not good. They still aren't. But I think it was also like, it was hard to know where to put us because at that time it was kind of a novel thing to be a mixed race child in the early 90s. So that's why we left. And then we came back. So my family has always lived in either South Philly or Northeast Philly. So when I go to college, I went to college at Temple University and I moved to South Philly, and I lived for a long time on the block where my grandparents used to came from, where my great uncle lived, where all of, the people on my mother's side used to live in like the building of the city of Philadelphia, in like more modern history. So it was really interesting to me where around 2017, I start seeing a lot of New Yorkers moving in. And I stepped outside one time and I realized I don't know any of these people on the entire block. Everyone's from New York. And it made me so mad. And I would drive around the city. There would be potholes. The problems that we've been complaining about as Philadelphians for so long were just remaining ignored. But they were investing money in putting like a Ferris wheel and like these like cool parks and like opening Brooklyn Bowls in Philadelphia to appeal to the new New Yorkers that were coming in. And I was like, this isn't even for us. Like, this is so ridiculous. And it made me so angry.
Yeah.
So I started doing things at that time where I was like responding to newspapers. I was writing into newspapers. I was saying like, hey, actually, just so you know, the street that I live on used to be where all of the Black doctors and lawyers used to live. This was a historical area for Black academic professionals. And now not only are there no Philadelphians on this block, there are also no Black people on this block besides me. And that was great because actually they put up one of those historical signs on that street to show that it was Black Doctors Row. So I really appreciated that. But that was something I was really annoyed with. I was just like, felt like I was watching my city get erased. So then at that, I was like, you know what? I always wanted to move to New York. You guys all live in, you guys all came here and I need to leave. It can't be that much more expensive. Like, why not? We'll switch places. So then I get to New York and it is much more expensive, but that's not even the end of the story because I move into Crown Heights because Crown Heights reminded me of Philadelphia. And as I'm sitting there on my block over, the next 3-4 years, the demographic of my block completely changed. And it also, then I got angry again because I was like, who are these white 20-year-olds who will not say hello to Miss Green in the morning? That's unacceptable to me. And so it's just like you keep watching this, and I was definitely that person. I was like, we need to stop gentrification. But honestly, when I sat and thought hard about it, there's not that much that you can do.
Yeah.
You can yell at that neighbor. Someone else is going to move in now. So you can't really stop it on like with neighborhood brawls. Like that's not how you're going to end and preserve your community. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. I feel like it's just a multiple POV situation for me where I understand the rage. I understand the feeling. I understand like the grief that happens when your neighborhood changes in front of you and it's completely out of your control. But then I also see that maybe there's another way that this could be moving. So that's why I'm really excited to talk about this today because like I said, this has been on my mind for so many years. And yeah, I think as far as gentrification goes, I just want to preface this conversation by saying you aren't necessarily the problem in whatever city you live in, but you are in it and there's nothing you can do about it. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about where the blame belongs and we can just consider another way to move forward.
Love it. Can we get into the definition?
That's a great place to start. The definition, we always start here. But I think gentrification was actually coined, as far as I could tell in my researches, but it was in 1964 by a British sociologist named Ruth Glass. So this was describing upper middle class people moving into working class London neighborhoods. And yeah, this original meaning was really about class replacement and policy driven change. This was not just about people moving in. So I think in the US, this eventually became associated with the displacement of Black and Brown communities, especially in cities undergoing divestment. And then this like heavy quotes renewal process. And I think that's how we got to where we are now. I think like a lot of terms that we've discussed in the past, like woke or so many other things like canceled, it got diluted and weaponized. And now its original meaning, which was about policy, is now about the person that you think might be more affluent than you taking something from you. It's not policy, it's personal now. And I do think that that was on purpose. So I think this now people use gentrification to mean any outsider that has moved into a place that is not for them. And I don't know when we decided that we were all the jury of who deserves to be where. But yeah, I feel like we are just losing the plot a little bit on what
Yeah.
community means and what people are allowed to do with their
Right.
homes and families. And yeah.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's weaponized in both directions. You know, it's also, I have heard it when I hear people complaining about gentrification, it's like, what, you don't want the neighborhood to get nicer? Like,
Right.
what, you don't want these improvements? And it's, to me, it's not that at all. We all deserve to live in safe, well resourced communities, I think, you know? And that is not a, that doesn't have to be the only byproduct of, or that doesn't have to only happen from gentrification, right? It doesn't have to only be to appeal the upper class moving in. But I think a lot of times it gets weaponized like that, instead of saying, well, why aren't we investing in this community anyways, not just to bump up property values so that, you know, it makes a lot of sense to flip them and go in and it's not predatory and all of that. And yeah, I think that's an important distinction, because nobody's saying like, well, I don't think anybody's saying leave the dangerous areas alone, like let them become more dangerous and dilapidated. Like, no, why are the cities not taking care of them anyways? You
Yeah.
know,
I
why are
feel
we
like
not taking care of them?
this is, it has to be. And I hate hearing that in a conversation of like, yeah, don't you want this to be improved? That to me is like a zoom out is required here,
Yes.
because it's not even about that. What is happening here is, why wasn't the city investing in this
Right.
area in the first place? Why
Right.
can it only happen now when they have gotten rid of whoever they deem to be undesirable for that area?
Right.
Because the reason that the place or the neighborhood is unsafe is not because of the people who live there. It's because of the resources that are not there.
Yes.
And so I think getting clear on that kind of clarifies this whole picture of what gentrification is for and what we can do with it.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I want to talk more about this idea about like fighting your neighbors instead of the government, and how that's usually the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Because like I was saying, I think for me, I understand this feeling. People are mad for a reason, and I was mad for these same reasons. Your rent is up. Your culture feels erased. Your community feels completely unprotected. You don't know what's going to happen next now. So I think before it was about class replacement, but it was also about the systems that enabled that. So that includes landlords, developers, politicians. This isn't about that girl from Iowa that moved onto your block and wouldn't
Yeah.
say hi to the neighbor that lived there for 50 years. That is messed up, and she is rude for that, but it isn't actually her fault that this happened.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear about that, because I never really thought about it in that term, but that is how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and she just seems like a little bit of a bitch, and she would be a bitch in any neighborhood. So I
Yeah.
guess, you know, would happen
It's
one way
like,
or another.
yeah, because I feel like at the end of the day, the thing that we love about our communities is the community.
Right.
And I think the people who are profiting off of the communities that we live in don't care about that.
Right.
They are here for profit. We are here
Yes.
for community. And those two things don't really coexist neatly and comfortably.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I want to point out too, just like, think about what community feels like. It feels like a lot of different things to me. And I think it's probably different for everybody. But like, when I think of community, I think of belonging and understanding, you know, just and knowing, like belonging and knowing. And it's kind of a beautiful, like, mashup of all different sorts of people. And because we're all different, all people are different people. And, you know, regardless of what that looks like, but there's so much strength in community. And it does make sense why the profit structures want to silo us and keep us apart and not let us build community and not let us build community across lines of difference, you know, be that racial, class, etc. That feels very intentional. And I imagine it is easier to come in and you know, to an already bifurcated or segregated area and rip it the fuck up with, not enough pushback because people aren't united and there's not a strong foothold in the community. So,
Yeah, because you know who's the most likely to sell you out? Someone who's not in your community. So
true.
it
True.
just feels like the obvious answer all of a sudden. Not that it wasn't obvious before, but it does feel obvious now.
For sure. Yeah.
I feel like the way we talk about gentrification lately, in the past like several years, it is a flatter conversation than it should be because we all do have a place in it, but it's not necessarily to hold blame. I think we have a much more useful opportunity that we could be doing together, which I'm excited to get into because, yeah, it's not someone renting a 1 bedroom in your community is not the problem. The problem is probably more likely the fact that your rent is rising 40% this year and there's no
Right.
regulation on it.
Right.
And what are we all going to do about that?
You know, I think that's absolutely true. And I think going back to the first thing that you said, which I don't know why I always do that. I always go back to the initial thing that came out of your mouth and kind of skip the end thing. But I do that a lot. But going back to, I mean, bringing it up, the falsehood of individual responsibility here, right?
Totally.
Like, this is a big one. And I remember, I like to think about shame and guilt as it pertains to this because I think there's a lot of that. I remember, when I was looking for a house and, buying a house, I was like constantly feeling like I had to justify why I was doing this and why I was moving into a historically Black neighborhood as a white person. And my rationale, I remember this so clearly. I had looked at one place and they were evicting a tenant and then flipping it. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, that is so yucky to me. I would never. Like I couldn't just like be in that energy. And like I met the guy. I was like, no, like that feels really yucky to me. But the place that I ended up buying, it was like a little condo and they had just built this on a vacant plot of land that had been like an old dairy factory that had burned down in like the 60s. It had been vacant forever. And so I was like, okay, I'm not actively displacing anybody. That is my cutoff.
Yeah.
That I'm aware is my cutoff. And that was how it was for me. But I remember feeling like I didn't want to tell people where I lived because I didn't want to be judged. And I felt ashamed that like, is this okay for me to be doing? And I sought like, I didn't really seek approval, but I just kind of hid from it for a bit. And then I was like, no, you know what? The best thing I can do is try to be part of the community. And I thought I was going to live there a lot longer than I did. But we ended up moving out of state and then came back. But I was like, this is a beautiful, vibrant community. It's changing regardless. It's going to happen regardless of whether or not I'm one of the neighbors. So I just need to be a good neighbor and I need to like take care of people and help, and contribute to the community. But a lot of that shame came up. And I think, again, it's important to remember that they want us to feel shame. They want us to feel separate. They want us to feel like, oh, guilt. And like, look, if guilt and shame were productive emotions, okay. But like, it's helpful to name them. But it's
only helpful if you did
anything.
what you did, which is making an effort to engage with the community you're now a part of. Whereas I think what happens a lot is the shame makes people just try to hide and not go
Exactly.
unnoticed.
Exactly.
And that is where the shame is completely useless and
sure.
honestly self-serving.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, and I'm not equating this experience to the experience of a white person coming into a historically person of color neighborhood, but does feel kind of similar. There is something, this otherness, and I've been hyper aware of otherness for my entire life, but it's like growing up in Philadelphia, in the suburbs, even into New York. I have heard "go back to your country" more times than I could count. It is insane. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is my country. This is where I'm from. We're like, well, no, from where you're really from. And I'm like, Nigeria? I've never been there, but okay. Yeah, I guess I'll go there. And it's just so funny because, and not funny, it's actually terrible. Now I live in
Yeah.
Mexico City, and obviously I'm very sensitive to the fact that prices are raising here, which is outside of my control.
Yes.
However, having the same thing and hearing the same thing of like, go back to your country. And I'm like, wow, there is no place to go. And that is really stressful to me. But I think it's not even,
Wow.
but I'm not, don't say this just as like my sob story of being othered in whatever city, country, state I'm in, but it's also for everybody. This otherness is not helpful. And it makes it harder for us to do what we need to do, which is to protect the places that we live in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like that is like what really makes this all feel so manipulative to me. Because I think the big question that I always hear in no matter what city, wherever the gentrification conversation is these outsiders are coming in and buying up all of our things. But I think the better, more important question here is who is selling it and why.
Yes.
And I don't think we're
100%.
talking about it enough.
No. And when you have that othered experience, like it's so easy for all of the beneficiaries, right? Landlords, developers, politicians, Airbnbs, which in LA, the politicians and the developers are synonymous. It's like that's all of city council.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting thing because the best way to get people to do anything is to be like, look at this other group. They're coming in. They're doing, XYZ. I mean, look at like waves of xenophobia over the years. Like, it's so easy to just go, boogeyman. Oh, I'm unhappy with the state of healthcare. It's the immigrants' fault. Like, actually, no.
Seriously,
When a
are
system
we
works, it can't be exploited this easily.
like this has always been the hallmark of America, US
Yeah.
America is the foreigners, but the
The foreigners.
foreigners.
I know.
But now we're seeing it in like all major cities that they're saying like the foreigners are ruining your life. Are we
Yes.
not suspicious? We should be.
Yes.
It's weird that
100%.
everyone is saying that migration is as old as time itself. People have been moving around forever, but now it's a problem.
Yep.
And as a person who, and like, yeah, I accept culpability. I do live in Mexico City. I do live in the apartment of a friend. So I didn't take this home from anyone, as far as I know,
Yes.
except for him. He used to live here and it was built when he moved in here. So I think all that to say, though, it's just really interesting to be in this place where I'm looking around and it's like it's just so much fighting between us while they continue unchecked doing what they're doing. Actually, if I go back into the history of Philadelphia, the most dangerous quote unquote place in Philadelphia to pretty much anyone that you would ask would be North Philadelphia. North Philadelphia used to be the most affluent part of the city. The Philly Stadium actually used to be in North Philly. And that is a product of white flight. So now North Philly has yet to be totally gentrified. I feel like around Temple University, the campus is being gentrified, but I think like further in, I don't think they've made that push yet, but I think they will. But it's really interesting to see because it's like you're watching what's happening in New York City. New York City, I think from 2019 to now is unrecognizable to me.
Yeah.
The people that live there, the way the buildings look, the amount of condos that are going up, it's getting to a place where like artists are being pushed out and you're like, well, this was the point of New York. This is why everyone wanted to be here because it was interesting and vibrant and there was life here.
Yeah.
And now it's getting priced out. So then what happens when it's just full of people who can afford to live in these skyscraper condos? They're going to get bored and they're going to leave and it's going to start all over again because this is just about a quick buck. This isn't about
Right.
restoring a community. Also, all of these buildings that are being built are like made of tissue paper. So I don't understand. Like it's obvious that this is not like a long-term investment into the city. It's a
Truly.
cash grab.
Yeah.
And we're all paying for it, literally and figuratively.
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And oh, it's so interesting. I think I have to say, like, the term white flight just makes me crack up because I just think of these like harpies, like these like white people with wings, like flying away and being like evil, with big teeth.
Like flying monkeys in Wizard of Oz.
Exactly. Yeah. No,
Honestly,
almost,
that's such a good
exactly.
metaphor, actually.
truly, it is like the monkeys.
Yeah,
And
it is the
because
monkeys.
they shouldn't have been bad and they weren't once, but
Right.
they were weaponized by bad people.
By
Oh
this
my
little magic
God.
trick, this scam of gentrification, where they are making you and helping you misdirect your anger so that you never look at who's actually in charge. And you are just, the community that you're trying to protect is more divided than ever before because you are being, the smoke and mirrors is making you look away from where this is coming from. And we need to stop it.
This is just, again, I think I have this realization like once a month that the Wizard of Oz
Is
got everything
everything.
right
Yeah. No,
and
seriously.
is everything, and Wicked,
It
God
can fit
bless
almost
you.
every situation,
I
but
it's
definitely racism.
but it's so for real.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, but like gentrification and displacement and yes, queerness, blackness, like all, oh my God.
And then what do we
Okay.
have as a result? Instead of the community that we're trying so hard to protect by yelling gentrification in service of our overlords, we now have gatekeeping, xenophobia, horizontal violence, and completely segregated and disrupted
And the
neighborhoods.
wizard stays behind the curtain. It's seeming all powerful
Exactly.
and nobody
Nobody's
nobody
questioning it. Or if they
challenges
are,
them. Yeah.
honestly, I feel like I think we as the people are doing a lot at looking at the government, but I still think every time you're about to go yell at your neighbor, take a second,
Yes.
see if maybe you need to pivot that there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just another form of like this displacement, right? And it's not healing what's been lost. It's adding to the loss. Like you're furthering the chasm, right?
Yeah,
And
you're participating in the thing that you don't want.
exactly. And it's just continuing to get worse. And then there's nothing. It's a hollow bottom. Like you can't come back to anything. But, and instead of like, it's just this misdirected energy, right? Instead of protesting policy, people protest people and get mad at other people. They internalize the otherness and they start performing this like protectionism. And like you said, the gatekeeping, the xenophobia, horizontal violence, like all of the things that start coming in, it's a front for what's actually happening, which is that a lot of people are profiting from this strife
Yeah,
and this shame and this lack of community. And that's a really sad, like it feels like a double tragedy.
totally. Yeah. We're breaking up our communities for them, which is so
Yes,
gross to realize.
exactly. 100%.
Well, that's why I want to start talking about this other thing. I just started thinking about this because recently, as a person who lives in Mexico City, I think this is about 4 weeks ago, there was a big anti-gentrification protest in Roma Norte. No, it was in Condesa in Mexico City. And it was interesting because I was seeing them say a lot of the things that I used to say. And it's a tough place. I know that nobody here wants to hear from me and be like, oh, I know how you feel because I'm the one that they're mad at. But it just made me think back on this. And I was like, there's nothing that you can do if you follow this track. I mean, their protest was helpful. The Mexican government did respond pretty quickly. They put some protections in place, which was helpful. Same thing happened in New York City, where I forget what year this was, a couple of years ago. They made it so that you cannot have an Airbnb property. You have to live
Yeah,
there at least part of the time, which was really helpful because when I left New York, there were more Airbnbs than apartments, which is crazy.
that's
And
nuts.
yeah, it was just like such a terrible situation. I don't know that it helped housing that much in New York. I think the prices are still way too high.
Yeah.
People still have roommates way too long, and the apartments are not good quality. But it did at least free up some space, which is good. But what I started thinking about in Philadelphia, I was like, if I could go back in time, what would I have done knowing what I know now? And I think the answer is I would have made more of an effort because I made an effort to try and preserve the history of the block and the neighborhood that I lived in. I did not make an effort to bring those newcomers in, and I should have. I think this like brings up this whole concept to me that I started thinking about when I had this train of thought about living history.
Mm,
Because if you think back on the way these cities were, like I just said, North Philly used to be where all the rich white people lived, and now they don't. So it's not like this is, from the beginning of time, this type of person lived here. We can't trace back really anybody's family, except like Native Americans, most
yeah.
likely, to a piece of land to the beginning of their line. It's not how the US is.
Yeah.
And so there's just like, migration, every movement, every, switch up of a community is just how history is made. And I think if you look back at the people who were talking, who were, the civil rights movement, I don't think a lot, I mean, some of those actions I think were meant to make headlines, but some of them weren't. And I don't think those people knew that they were making history because you don't know if it's going to work and you don't know what's going to happen in the future and what's going to stick out as like a turning point.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that people forget a lot is that history is happening right now and what we
Yes.
do matters. Because if I could go back in time into Philly, what I would say is we should have had a push for welcoming in the new people and making and intentionally building community together. Because what I
Yes.
see now is that if you don't do that, the government will do it for you. And it's not going to be for you, it's going to be
Absolutely.
around you or it's going to push you out.
Oh, well said. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's this idea of living history, I think is so profound. It's like, culture is always moving. It's becoming. It's an ever evolving process. And I think again, I'll speak as an American because that's really all I feel like I can do. Um, we are a nation of tribal nations and immigrants, and we're pretty new. We're pretty new here, except not the tribal folks. But it's like, okay, we have this opportunity, unique opportunity to be such a cool melting pot of different cultures and perspectives and classes and races and religions and genders and sexuality, like all of it. Like we have such a cool opportunity here, and you can see how it feels in some places, like even LA. You can just feel it differently. I don't know, it feels good to me. It never feels homogenous. And sometimes it does, because when it's like, oh, all of these people are trying to become the same person, that feels a little yucky to me. But like, it's it's a very cool opportunity we have. And that does not mean that justice still can't be done for communities, especially, communities of color and specifically indigenous communities. And, the ills and the wrongs of centuries that we have done to tribal nations, we have dismantled culture in a very calculated way, and erasing languages and doing very specific things. But I've even heard some folks talk about, okay, well, the language preservation isn't so much important anymore as is XYZ community resources and getting back to things. It's going to look different for everybody, though. And again, this is not a one size fits all. That's the point of culture. It's going to be different everywhere. It's going to feel different. It's going to move differently. And but again, like, it doesn't mean that it's just like, now it is what it is. Like, we ignore justice. Justice is very much a part of culture, and it should be. And it should be part of the conversation. So,
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, the language tip is really an interesting because I feel like that speaks to globalization, which is like a bigger
yeah.
conversation here.
Right.
But I feel like as a writer, language evolves. And
Yes.
I don't think it's necessary that we have, I mean, culturally, yeah, you can preserve things, but it isn't necessary that we preserve it in the way that everyone continues speaking these languages forever, because as we mix more, it is actually more important that we understand each other. So
Yeah.
I think yeah, I think you can hold both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, culture always moves. People always move. It has always happened. It always will. You can't
Yes.
stop the people from coming. You just can't.
Yeah.
Unless
Right.
you make your city a gated community, which I think defeats the purpose. So,
Well, and a little slight sidebar that can either stay in the episode or leave it. Um, but I find like the Nordic countries, like the whole Scandinavian region, very interesting because they are so homogenous and but they have like such successful communities there because they protect their people and don't let others in. I have really no opinion on whether or not that's right or wrong, but like those are the indigenous groups of those areas.
yeah,
That is their land, and they have what they need to serve their people well.
totally.
And
No, I think that makes a ton of sense.
I think it's cool. Like that's great. And they don't let anybody in, white people from anywhere. Like, no, it's if you were born here, great. If not, get fucked. But like
Yeah.
that's really interesting to me. I
I
don't know.
think that is really
Yeah.
interesting. I hope someone writes in about this because honestly,
Yeah.
my perspective is only encompasses major cities.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know much about other places. And also, yeah, there's so many different ways that this conversation can go. But I think that one thing that it comes down to is I don't know. I don't believe that culture should be a living museum. I don't think that we need to. I think it's I think there's something hopeful in a time that is kind of lacking hopefulness about thinking about how we will tell the story of our culture later. Like, 50 years from now, God willing, we all still exist and we could look back and say like, yes, actually, this community was like this, but then notably in 2025, this thing happened and the people pivoted this intentionally in this way because this happened.
Yeah.
And I think that is the story that I want to see instead of, yeah, the government redlined this area and then everything fell into shambles.
Yes.
That's not a good story, but we could have a good story as the people.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in that vein, thinking about building together and all of that being the antidote to displacement, erasure, culture loss, culture, and not even just culture loss, right? Like what we've been talking about, culture dissonance in some ways, I think, and just that separation from the current. I want to talk about the story of Crenshaw Mall.
I don't know
And
this.
yes, so there's a massive missed community ownership opportunity. And this happened while I was living in the Crenshaw area. Leimert Park and Crenshaw are right next to each other. And I want to tell this story because it's so important and it would have been such a wonderful thing to go look at. This is how you do community improvement. And unfortunately, I can't do that because it does not have a happy ending. But the story here is a Black-led South LA community group with, a phenomenal vision for equity and ownership and affordable responsibility, lost their shot at reclaiming a major cornerstone of the community in Crenshaw, and that is Crenshaw Mall, big land area. And it was, up for sale. Downtown Crenshaw Rising, which I believe is the main organization, submitted a $115 million bid to buy the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. And that they had like a whole development plan featuring affordable housing, locally owned retail, a hotel, and community shares for Black ownership. It would have been a beautiful, financially successful pillar of the community. And despite being the highest bidder, Their proposal was sidelined, and instead the mall was sold to development interests connected to Jared Kushner
No
and
way.
his network through like some group or whatever. And clearly, this was just them benefiting from entrenched systems of power rather than turning it over to community stewardship. And it
Community is bad for big business.
Yes, yes, it is. And so that actually had a ton of backlash. There were thousands of signatures, and they like multiple organizations protested the ties to Kushner and Trump. Which, like, okay, I feel like that's actually kind of the weaker point. It's just why, like, we submitted the highest bid. Why was this not on the table?
Right.
Like, again, thinking purely from a monetary standpoint, so stupid. But they forced the sale to get back on the table. But ultimately, the property went to another development company and not the community. And
Wow.
the final, like, little bit there, I don't know if they were outbid. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but this would have been such a wonderful model for profitability and community ownership. It would have been a win-win for everyone, and except, you know, those who rely on siloed systems of power. But you know, it's here, like, we could have had this incredible opportunity to like build so much more community and to rally folks, and instead, what a disempowering way to leave the situation. And it made me so upset at the time, and I am still upset to think about it. But, you know, I think going back to what I said earlier about, you know, people being like, well, gentrification is the only way to get, you know, nice things in neighborhoods and have resources. No, communities
No.
can advocate for themselves when they have community, which the community in South LA is extremely, extremely strong. And the communities, I should say, in South LA. But like, what a beautiful thing that is that they did. And, you know, I don't know, the stories, nobody's story is over, right? It's still happening, but it makes me very sad that the outcome wasn't different.
That's so interesting because you know what? I was going to reference Insecure, the TV show. And I was going to, because we're doing a rewatch right now. I feel like we rewatch it every year because it's a good litmus test on your growth as an adult to see who you side with and what what characters you align with. It changes every time. But
Interesting.
Issa puts on the community block party music festival in that exact same area that you're talking about in season 4, I think. And yeah, so I just thought that was really interesting because it's for this exact thing. You know, you see the buildup in the seasons of Insecure of the gentrification happening in that exact neighborhood that you're talking about. I only know the names of these neighborhoods because of Insecure. And then, yeah, to hear this story is really interesting because then to combat it, she's like, no, this needs to be for us, by us. Shout out to Fubu. And I think was just really interesting to see because that was the thing. It works when you get to do something with the people that are around you. It's like thinking about that model as like what I'm suggesting, what I think could be really cool if we could just embrace where we're at now and showcase, or even just to say like, hey people, welcome. You're in this neighborhood now, but this is what we're about. So please come correct. Please get involved.
Yes.
This is what we do. This is what, if you have an idea that you want to bring to the table about another thing that this community can do, we'll review it.
Yeah.
But this is a community effort. And I feel like that's how you actually protect each other. Because then when your neighbor gets pushed out, you don't know who they are. You are more likely to help them if you're in community with them. So I just think I think there's just so much here of, you know, this is obviously such a big conversation that we can't cover in 1 hour, but I do think this isn't a lane for this conversation that I've heard before. So I'm glad to be having it here. And I hope people will engage with that with us because what I really think is like, yeah, building together with intention is the antidote to all of this.
Totally.
And we don't really have to be choosing between honoring the past and welcoming the future. We can be doing that at the same time. And
Absolutely.
that is more about you like values alignment than, who's right, whose fault it is that,
Yeah.
this apartment is no longer owned by the family that it was once owned by.
Yep.
Because there are some things as it stands, because they have more capital, the people, the developers, the landlords, the business owners, the politicians, they have more power than us right now,
Yeah.
one to one, but not when we have a strong community.
Yes.
So I think that is something that I would like to hear people talking about more. Whereas instead of, we're marching to say, get out of our neighborhood, we are instead of focusing on that, we're focusing on what's going to happen in our
Yeah.
neighborhood now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think this is it's a good reminder to remember that you don't have to hold all of the things that feel way too big for you to hold. It's not actually meant for you to hold yourself. It's meant for the community to have your back and for you to all collectively hold it and say,
Absolutely.
oh, actually, this fear, we actually have the power over that. We don't have to feel that way. We can do something about it, and we can bring in our new community members and build community with them and acknowledge that that's what is happening. And it doesn't have to be insular. It doesn't have to be, I'm definitely guilty of like being suspicious of newcomers and liking my little insular group and not
Yeah.
wanting it to change. But that's usually with friend groups, I would say. But it's a good reminder that you don't have to hold it all yourself when you have a community.
I think actually I have this thing that I'm doing right now that people feel free to steal this idea if this resonates for you. After the protests in Mexico City, I got together with one of my friends who is a native to Mexico City. And we were just talking about it. And we were like, okay, here's our plan. We're going to meet up next month, and each of us needs to bring two more people. And we're just going to keep expanding it because what we want is to have a group of Mexicans, local people, and immigrants like myself, where we can come together and just talk about like how we can meaningfully contribute to the community and what we can do together to not just be extractive as neighbors,
Yeah.
but to really put something back in. And that's hard to do because as an immigrant, until you are a citizen, you actually can't be involved in any protesting. You will get deported. So it's like how can we positively and safely encourage positive change and protect the people that live here? Because
Yeah.
if Mexico City was full of Americans, I probably wouldn't have chosen to live here. So it's
Yeah.
like, that's
Right.
not the goal. We don't want this to
Right.
happen. But it's just, yeah, how do we help preserve the place that we love, the place that we love so much that we decided that we wanted to be here instead?
Yeah.
So how do we add to it? So that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that could be done in your neighborhood. And it really, as you can tell from my story, it only takes one person to start it. And then every time you bring two more people, those two people, the month after that, they bring some more people until you
Love
have
it.
quorum and you can actually move something. There's another group in Mexico City called Gringo Tax, which is not the same, but they have a couple of initiatives and fundraisers so that they can
Yeah.
kind of give back as well. But yeah, the more the merrier. I'm sure like this is a
That's
city
cool.
with like 36 million people, so we probably need more than just one little group.
Yeah.
So
I love that idea though. Bring more people in. I think that's nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's like slowly develop community where it's like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we're all on the same page. Here's my
Absolutely.
perspective. This would be helpful. And you could be like, no, actually, it wouldn't be. So,
Yep.
so I don't come in here as an American and just try to prescribe
Yeah.
help to a
Well,
city that I'm not from.
and you know what I usually find too? If you're respectful and you're excited to be somewhere and you are bringing love to the situation, the locals, like where I live now, there are people like you. There are people who've lived here for 40 years and are still not locals because it's the people who were born here. Like
Mm,
those are the locals. But you come in and everyone has just been so excited to have me here. And like, that's the nicest feeling because, of course, they're not like excited to have me here, but they're just excited to get to share their love of their community with me and to bring me into that. And that's a beautiful, like, very sacred process that I'm able to participate in its unfolding and go, wow, I'm able to just be new here and not be sure how to contribute yet, but like I can ask and I can get involved and I can just see things and I can maintain a beginner's mindset and be just so happy to be in the room. And
Exactly.
it's
Yeah, like
lovely.
the Mexico City gentrification conversation online has been going on for a long time, but as a person
Yeah.
who's been here for years, no one has ever said it to my face. Everyone
Yeah.
has been welcoming and excited, and
Yeah.
we get to have these conversations where it's like, okay, well, what should we do? What do you
Yeah.
think? And I love that. I love to be in
Yeah.
community. It's my favorite thing in the world. It's the point of everything as far as I'm
Yes.
concerned. And
Amen.
like even we're always talking about on the show local politics. Even just being in community with your neighbors is local politics. First of all, it's
Yeah.
actually where it all begins. And yeah,
Absolutely.
the local politics like voting, that is like the codified version of it. But
Yeah.
it does come down to one to one. Who's your neighbor? How do you talk to each other? How do you support each other? Because
Yep.
you need to be.
Yep.
You're not strong enough to withstand the forces that be without them. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Well said. Well,
well, I think to wrap up this conversation, really, overall, I think the point that we're getting to is that the answer to this fear that's happening is not exclusion, it's intention. And we can build this community across difference. We can protect ourselves better now
yeah.
that we know that it is not the blame. The blame doesn't belong to each other, it belongs above us. And we
Yeah.
need to put it where it belongs so we can actually protect each other. So yeah, we don't want the government to decide what the futures of our communities look like. We want our communities to decide that. And first things first, we need to be in community. So
Amen.
I hope that this resonates with you. Please, like we said at the beginning, please write in, let us know, carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong, at Often Wrong Pod on TikTok and Instagram, or just whatever platform you're listening on, leave a comment because we'd love to hear
Yep.
from you. This is such a big conversation, and the more POVs, the better.
Please.
Because we want you to talk more.
Yep. And
New stuff needs to be said.
we're happy to be wrong. Always happy to be wrong.
Always.
Always.
Oh my God, now that we're on TikTok, I think some people are telling us we're wrong more.
Yes.
So
Somebody said that the name of our podcast is apt. And I am so proud.
true.
Thank you. It
That's
is.
why we picked it. We're so
That's the
smart for that.
point. Yes. Thank you.
We were right about that. So
Thank you. Yeah. At the same time, we can be so wrong, but also right.
So right.
So right. Oh, well, thanks
I
for
love it.
listening. And we'll talk to you soon.
TTYL. Bye.
Bye. Often Wrong is produced by Lisa Nwankwo, Claire Cornetta, and Joe Abdella. This episode was shot and edited by Joe Abdella. Special thanks to Michael Drummonds. Often Wrong is a Carrot Impact podcast. Go to carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong to learn more.